This episode of the AIXR podcast is brought to you by our friends at Zapper. If you're in the XR space, you've probably felt the pain of juggling different tools, vendors, and platforms just to get an AR or VR project off the ground. It's exhausting, and it can really slow you down. That's where Zapper comes in. They built a complete suite of tools and creative services all under one roof to make creating immersive experiences not just possible, but practical. Their next-gen 3D web tool, Mattercraft, is a game changer for building immersive experiences for headsets, smartphones, and AR, VR, and WebXR. It combines the power and flexibility of the 3JS rendering engine with a rich visual editor, making it super intuitive and easy for designers and developers to use. Put simply, you get the creative freedom of a powerful 3D engine with none of the headaches. So if you're ready to take your immersive projects to the next level, head over to zapper.com and see what they can do for you.
Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, September 5th. We are through August and into September through Labor Day. And Rony and I are here for the AIXR podcast. Good morning, Rony. How are you?
Morning, Ted.
So Charlie is on a mode of transportation this morning, an old-fashioned mode of transportation we call an airplane. So he is not joining us today. So it's just you and me. And we have some interesting guests today, Jason and Monica, from a company called Secret Level, which is an AI production company, a full-force AI production company that works with large brands, does independent content. And Jason was on a TED Talk. He did a TED Talk where they actually he polled the audience to get ideas and then did a quick turnover, like 3 days, to build this AI short that was around a beaver kind of romance story, sci-fi thing, and the pressure of being on the TED stage is really interesting. I've done a TEDx talk, and that was a lot of pressure. But being on the big stage in Vancouver is a lot of pressure. So we'll talk to Jason about that. I also want to mention our sponsor, Vitcher, who allows us to do this podcast every week and gives us the ability to chat about all the interesting things week to week that are going on. So before Jason and Monica join us, we're going to chat about what we normally chat about, which is newsworthy topics around AI, VR, XR, MR, and tech in general. As we know, a couple of weeks ago, we took off for Labor Day. A few weeks ago, we had an interesting diversion into the sort of political realm, which was a bit odd for us. But interesting, right, to get different points of view and different sort of thoughts around things. But we're sort of back on track today, Rony. So there's a few topics of interest. Sort of the most newsworthy things this week are what happened with the Google lawsuit, the potential breakup where they were going to start to split off the search engine. And Google sort of escaped mostly that. Apple is the beneficiary of that because they're still going to use the Google search engine underneath the covers when you use Safari and are doing any kind of search function on their iPhone or iOS. Apple stock went up a little bit because of that. Any thoughts on that before we cover anything else?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think the judge leaned generally in the right direction. And what's interesting is that there's so much competition for search. It's really hard to think that Google is like a lone monopolist right now.
Right. Yeah, I think one of the things that a lot of commentary touched on, bless you, Rony's a little sick today, he's under the weather, was that because of AI becoming a valid alternative to search, or at least in people's perception, even though it does do different things and can hallucinate and give you a different algorithm to pull up relevant search events, search protocols and so forth, it is becoming quite popular, right? And there is a new competitive landscape that probably didn't exist a few years ago. So I think the judge kind of reflected on that and was aware of that, which is good because very often people in the legal system are not really aware of the landscape. It seemed like he's aware of the landscape and made roughly the right decision on allowing this to function the way that people wanted to.
No, like if this was 2019, it would have been very different. Right. But I think what's interesting is like in the last like 3 to 4 years, a whole generation is going to like OpenAI or something else. And sometimes even Gemini, which is a Google thing. But in that search new path, Google is not their declared winner at all.
Right.
So it could be that there's a lawsuit against OpenAI at some point for AI search in 10 years,
Exactly. I see both Jason and Monica from Secret Level have joined. So feel free to turn your cameras on so we can see you and your mics on, and you're welcome to join us for the news segment. We're going to talk another 5 to 7 minutes about kind of daily topics that are on our minds and probably your minds. But we look forward to talking about your work. And Jason, I mentioned your quite fantastic TED Talk that I watched this past week. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about your company and where you're headed and what you're doing and why it's so intriguing. But before we get into that, there's a few other news things that are bubbling up. We just talked about the Google potential breakup that was narrowly averted, as it were.
Thwarted, yeah.
Thwarted, yes. The other thing that's interesting is in about 4 days, September, I think 9th is the day, Apple will do its next big event, right? They do their sort of quarterly events. And this one is supposedly awe-inspiring. That will be some interesting things about mostly their new iOS device lineup. There'll be some significant sort of upgrades to the devices, I think, to try and stimulate a next generation of turnover in the product sort of buying cycle, mostly focusing on weight and form factor, which is interesting, and better cameras, from what I can tell from a rumor standpoint. This is all rumors until 4 or 5 days from now. But the one I think everybody's curious about and waiting to see is will Tim Cook get on stage and show a foldable iPhone? So Rony, any thoughts on that? Any desire to see that? And before I sort of let you dive in on it, Samsung has had a number of generations of this, and the latest one is actually pretty remarkable. It's quite thin, and it sort of functions as a phone form factor and a tablet form factor, right, when you open it up. So I think it's nice, but it's still a very, very small market share for Samsung. It's still drifts into the exotic side, and we all have a curiosity: is this the thing that Apple users will want, and what will Apple do that's so special to make it something that captures more than just a couple percent of the iPhone market? So
It's a little disappointing for me that Apple, which used to pull everyone, is now like trailing behind Samsung. Apple Pencil trailed behind Wacom and other players, including Samsung. And now the folding thing, which is like, 10 years with other companies out there for a while, it doesn't, they portrays them as a very late follower, which maybe is how they want to be. But they used to be like a great design company and pushing the envelope. Now it really seems to be like way, way back behind. So I think for like people who grow up as fans, at least like if you follow the cycle over, not just the last 5 years, but more than that, it's a bit disappointing. I don't know. What do our guests think?
Well, it leads. Let me add this, and then we can ask Jason and Monica what they think. It leads into an interesting sidebar discussion about what Sam Altman, who apparently is in a little hot water about something really bad that happened with a kid who took his own life using OpenAI agents this week, which is, of course, tragic and horrible. And it'll be interesting to see how they navigate that. They're doing their kind of press moments now. But in this sort of strange bedfellows, but interesting bedfellows moment with Johnny Ive, and whatever this thing they may be making to kind of further the Steve Jobs legacy a little more than the Tim Cook legacy, to your point about innovation. There's an intrigue to all of us about what will this Johnny Ive plus OpenAI product offering be. So Jason, Monica, if you have any thoughts on that based on what you're thinking about in your world, that's certainly interesting to kick around for a moment.
Thoughts on the next iPhone or the secret
either or.
Wearable.
It's an open forum, whatever you'd like to chat about. But what's ever on your mind?
I'm super interested in the wearable. I know a lot of people think that it's going to be intrusive of their privacy, but it's, we're already recorded by so many devices. I'm always curious, just having a record of everywhere you've been, everything you've seen. It's interesting concept, personally.
Yeah. Monica, any thoughts on that?
I would agree with Jason. What's most interesting is the thought of a wearable. We've been seeing, we have the glasses and people are Snap and everybody else is trying to make their own version of that. Glasses are cumbersome. So I'm really interested in Will, and I think in this, especially in a social age where documenting your life is a thing, and wanting to see everything, and then having something intelligent to be able to tell you about your surroundings, it's super interesting to me to see how accurately that does, and how people will absorb it. We worry about privacy, but we carry phones that tell everything we do and everywhere we go. So I think just people are going to be open to it now.
Right. So we'll keep an eye on that. In other interesting news from a few weeks ago, because we were off last week, the week before that was SIGGRAPH, the big graphics conference, and Meta still in the game of pushing the envelope, which is interesting. They showed 2 new early stage prototype headsets, one that has three times or maybe slightly more than 3 times the resolution of a Quest 3. So you're talking about sort of, no pixel awareness at all concept, and a wider field of view, and then another ultra wide field of view. They both have interesting nicknames. I can look them up as you're chatting, but we kind of like to see that they're still putting dollars and resources into moving that forward, right? In the sort of large form factor goggle style. And then the other thing that's of interest, which we may get a pretty good peek at the Connect conference, which is, I think, the end of this month, or maybe it might be early October, which is Meta's kind of version of their annual conference. They will launch what's called Hypernova, which is the next evolution of their smart glasses platform, which will have some sort of display technology in it. So that may jump, and this is a particular interest to Rony because of his background with Magic Leap, that may jump that last sort of piece of the chasm to get to a consumer deliverable with an actual visual component, as opposed to all the experiments that have not crossed that chasm yet. So that's something we can talk about for a minute.
Who wants to go
Thoughts,
first?
Rony?
Well, I wanted to just make one more comment about the Meta system.
Yeah.
When you look at what they're building there, is it just not a slightly tweaked Vario? That they're proclaiming. I mean, Vario's been doing this for more than 10 years. Vario is stunning. I don't think Meta is like much better, or maybe even not the same spec. I'll have to double check it. But is
Right.
it
Is it really
anything
groundbreaking?
other than, hey, we're really good at copying smaller companies and pretending they don't exist?
Yeah.
I'll tell you why I expressed my disappointment. Vario does not have, 3+ billion a quarter for the last decade to do what they're doing. So a company that's spending 15 billion plus a year for now many years, and then new cool thing at SIGGRAPH is something that Vario did,
Number of
number of
years ago.
years ago, is already out in the market. Is like, what is going on? You're at least hoping, you're spending so much money. Dear God, do something. Push the envelope past copying other people and just achieving close to where they were.
Right.
Unless the universe has some speed limit, like the speed of sound. It's like, thou shalt not pass, or you, Meta, shall not pass this line because you cannot. It's perplexing to me. When I saw how much money Mark was spending, I was convinced he was going to cross thresholds that we saw just ahead of us with much smaller burn rate, but he hasn't been able to.
Yeah.
So something funny is going on. I don't know if it's a physics issue, a neuroscience issue, but we thought we saw a path there. And they're spending so much money. Either it's so diffused on so many kooky projects that make no sense that no real dollars are aimed at the thing that actually matters. But I think if you like this field, what we do, the blend of computing intelligence, sensing, and hopefully getting it there so we can have this amazing visual experience. It's sad that first at least 100 billion, I would say more than 100 billion is spent between just Apple and Meta, and we're still not there. That's
Right.
insanely disappointing.
Right. Yeah. I think to your point about the Vargio, I think exotic, expensive, brought down somewhat in cost, but maybe
already done.
Yeah.
Already there. So what's the point of Meta reproducing Vario, but as Meta,
Yeah. It's interesting. Interesting perspective. Okay, one more quick story, and then we'll dive in with Jason and Monica on what they're doing, which is going to be interesting.
Really fun.
Our friend Doug Lyman. So the Venice Film Festival is, of course, going on, and there's a big XR component of that. And Doug Lyman has been involved in XR content. One of the pioneers, early stage. We worked with him on some things, and has lived through sort of many lives of what the hardware can do, what the cameras can do. And he premiered a 12-minute immersive thriller project that looks like Google and Samsung funded for their new headset, which, again, to Rony's point, doesn't really appear all that groundbreaking, but they're still pushing on it, and they committed some dollars and budget to this, which probably leads a little into your world, Jason and Monica, in terms of new platforms, new ideas, where the money's coming from. This is sort of a corporate daddy, right? To provide the dollars that can allow these things to happen. And this is a common running theme. They'll get a big known name director, producer to make a project with their money as a showcase, right? So that's kind of an interesting thing to keep an eye on out of this year's Venice Film Festival. And of course, there's an AI component to this, which leads into, Jason, your work, where they're using Google Gemini, and then there's like an after project thing that viewers can interact with an AI with Gemini, probably experiencing a part of it. I haven't seen it, so we'll have to wait to see it. But
yeah, I read about it. It looked really interesting.
Oh, did you actually see the project, or you just
I haven't seen it. I just read it online. Yeah,
right.
But
so there's some news about it. So I guess we'll get some reports on it. Don't have much more information other than it is playing, and I guess we'll next week we'll have some reviews on it. So we'll hear what we hear about it. Okay. Any other thoughts before we dive into our guests today? Rony, anything you want to close out the loop on our news segments today and stuff?
I'm actually very excited to talk about what you guys are doing. It's very near to my heart, and I'd love to hear about how you found the balance between more normative production tools that give you more control and how you're blending in AI. And, some of the listeners are makers. I don't know what you want to share about how you do it or not share how you do it, but I'm super interested to hear about it.
My instinct is you'll share a lot. So let me do a quick intro and then let you guys dive in. This is just a conversation about where you're going, what you're intrigued by, what matters to you about where we're headed with this space. So I spent a little time with Jason and Monica. We've been talking about a few projects with some significant scope, feature length idea concepts and movies really leaning into AI. They've had some significant awareness and success. I mentioned the TED Talk that you did, so I'm going to have you chat about that. We also want to learn about your background, what sort of led you into this, because I think you were in the traditional VFX and production world and sort of dove headfirst into this. So I want to learn a little bit about your backgrounds as producers and directors and creators, and sort of the journey that you're on now. And then let's talk about some of the key projects, both with the large commercial project that you've been getting, things like Coca-Cola and Mercedes, and they did a thing with Will.i.am and some other things that are interesting. So if that's a good enough tee up to have you just start a little bit of your background, what your company's all about, and then some things of note that you want to talk about, and then where you're headed.
Sure. So, I've been at this intersection of sort of storytelling, innovation, and technology for almost 30 years now. From the early days of the internet, actually from CD-ROMs to the early days of the internet.
You're in sort of the broader bund CD-ROM phase of.
Oh yeah, I mean, I moved to San Francisco right at the end of CD-ROMs, right when the very beginning of the internet was happening. And love telling, as a storyteller director, always love telling stories that are powered by like innovative uses of technology. So, I had a agency called Evolution Bureau. We were one of the first to do interactive video with Macromedia Flash back in the day. Have been, doing interesting things with video for a while. So when I first saw what AI could do, we used it actually in a reboot of Take This Lollipop in 2020 when we were locked down. You could go onto takethislollipop.com and get into a Zoom call like this with 3 strangers who were fake. And while you were sitting there, we basically took your face and deep faked you. And at the end of the experience, you said something you never said.
And that was like an interactive horror
experience. Yeah. And that was in 2020. So I got really addicted to the where AI could go, but it wasn't until generative came out. And when I first played with Midjourney, I just knew like everything had changed. And then obviously when we started getting into video, As a director who has been on, low budget shoots, high budget shoots, $1 million plus shoots, the fact that I could just type something in and get a video out, it was, just like for me, mind blowing. And in 2023, sort of the fall of 2023, I was at a production company as a director, and I was just seeing everything changing, and I said, I got to do something. So I jumped in, started Secret Level. Monica, we started working together. We line produced for me for years. We've worked together on various productions, jumped in as well, and we've been really at, I would say, 100% AI native, meaning we start in AI and we push it as far as we could go. And that's through commercials, that's through short films, that's through lots of content that we've done for TV now. We're getting into movies, and we're really excited about pushing AI and being at the forefront of like really how could we push this technology as far as we can, and even if we can get something 80% there, and we have to do 20% with traditional visual effects or anything that gets us there, I'm just happy to have that ability as a storyteller.
What's interesting to me, and I think Rony would recognize this too, is when we meet people that have lived through the sort of ending of one technology frontier and the beginning of a next one. And if you've had a number of those cycles in your life, like you described sort of the CD-ROM phase and the kind of physical properties of having to make a computer work to do entertainment that way, to the beginnings of the internet, to the maturation of the internet, to then sort of these next pieces of the puzzle. I kind of live that life with the camera side of things, kind of living from the analog film world, and then being able to move through these transition phases, watching something that you got a sense was kind of its last breath is kind of the wrong terminology, but moving out of favor, that things will start to replace it. And people with our kind of personality profiles are more comfortable with these moments of change and see that they're not quite as disruptive as people think. They're just evolutionary, right?
Yes.
And it seems like you're quite good, you're quite skilled at moving from one transitionary point to another, which I've seen certain personality types are just better at this than others. They don't sense the worry as much as they absorb the opportunity. And there are certainly always worries with new things, right? And new problems. But usually it's the human side of the way that humans connect with the technology that becomes the worry point, as opposed to the technology itself. So maybe you or Monica have a thought on that based on your evolution.
Yeah, I believe that at Secret Level, we've always been people first, even though there's a level of technology there. I think that as much as we want to believe that, we will also, at least from the brand side, we work in an educational field to educate people of why it's disruptive, but it's not disruptive, and bringing people to the other side of that. And I think we've been very successful in showing that it's just not prompt. You can't just type a prompt. That's not going to yield you what you need or what you want. And then it really still does take the craft of the people that surround it, from people like Jason to other creative directors we have, to producers, to the artists. And we're very methodical about the work that we do and who we staff on that work. And so I think that really helps bring people across the finish line, at least with us, in that understanding of like, hey, we can do something really interesting and really cool. And this is just another evolution of something a little bit further to get your story told.
Right. Does it worry the two of you at all about the almost immediate flattening of the curve here? I think this is probably, within these technology waves that you've seen, this is probably the quickest time of something that feels exotic and maybe hard to accomplish to a plethora of humans that have various creative kind of goal sets, being able to achieve remarkable things, right? With the massive amount of spend that these large tech companies and these large now startups, multi-billion-dollar startups like OpenAI, have enabled, right? The enabling factor is so huge that do you find it more difficult to compete with the fact that there's just a huge swath of people that can do similar things and get those things out, and there's the barrier to entry is becoming almost non-existent? The only other point I could touch that sort of links that together is kind of the YouTube plus smartphone revolution, right? The idea
Yeah.
that everybody has a studio in their pocket and this new form of content becomes, and the
Yeah.
economics completely change. The platforms continue to make money, but the creators themselves, unless you're at a tiny little fraction of the top, it's kind of a false democracy, are
Yeah.
really not actually making a living doing this anymore. Is that where are you,
Yeah.
or like you,
I'm-
or is there something in the middle there?
I love that these tools, that anybody could use them, and jump on and start creating content. I think we're going to find a lot of people. Well, actually, we work with almost, nearly 100 artists, worldwide, some of the best in the world. And I've always loved, people that come from traditional backgrounds, in my opinion, are just the better artists, because they understand storytelling, they understand shot composition, understand all those things. But I've seen people completely change careers, and they were not storytellers or not doing that previously, and this has enabled them to do probably something they've always wanted to do. So I think that just the democratization of it, I think, is really interesting. But I do think that we're moving into a world where, previously it would take, there's 100 people on set, does there need to be 100 people on set? I think we're moving to these small teams that could accomplish amazing things. I think, when you look at the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature of last year, that was done by 30 or less people.
You're talking about Flow, the movie Flow?
For Flow, yeah.
Yeah.
And I just think that, like, that's going to be the new norm, in my opinion. I hope we're going to see a massive rise of independent content come out of that. The ability to, have, I've always used this in the analogy that, yes, everybody has a smartphone. You can go make a movie, but how many people have done that and been successful at that? So I think with AI, just because you could gather a bunch of people that can do it, doesn't mean that it's going to be great. Doesn't going to mean that it's going to be like extraordinary. But the fact that a lot of people can is going to give us more chances at bat, more odds in that. And that to me is really interesting, because I think if we've seen anything, and I just read an article about this morning, is that Hollywood's kind of stuck. The streamers kind of screwed everything up. They paid too much money. They would like a B movie, B level script would get lots of money. So just the economics is way off. And I'm hoping that AI kind of can reset that a little bit.
And I think
Jason, sorry, go on, Monica.
I was just going to say, I'll be very short. I think there's also tiers of entertainment. I think sometimes we function under the assumption that everything must be a Marvel movie type situation, right? Or everybody's going to make all these movies. But there's a lot of content out there that I think is very interesting, that it's, not why the guy who turns everybody into cake, or the guy who turns everybody into babies. So there's like all of these different niches within the AI community, and people who like straight raw AI, and there's people who like the stuff that we do, which is a higher caliber. And there's all these different tiers. And I think that there's a lot of room in this community for people to set up those different tiers. And the exciting thing to me, like Jason, is that seeing people like myself, who's always been a producer, being able to have that creative note to be able to like dive in and understand and want my thoughts heard too, not to the level that Jason does, or artist, but at least have that ability to do that. And what that does for a person and their human soul to express their creativity that they couldn't before is pretty astounding to me.
I have a question for both of you, for Monica, for you, and for Jason. So I pasted in the chat. Our folks can't see it, but I'll paste it on the Twitter later. So Thomas Kuhn has this great book about scientific revolutions where things don't have linear progression. They have like massive, like just deconstruction moments, like earthquakes, that were like fundamental paradigm shifts, like electricity. Wright brothers made bicycles, and for the very beginning, it was like bicycle people and airplane people were very similar. And then, like, a few decades later, we're on the moon. It's like completely, I don't know if they could foresee that, what they did at Kitty Hawk would be like moon, maybe 50 years later. But the question for you guys is, do you see this normative shift? Like, we're trying to make it fit into Hollywood and storytelling, filming. That's like what I think is the our own mental construct of what we're doing right now. But the tool and the things you're playing with in AI and computing are completely chaotically different. We're forced to do something like that's very cozy and comfy to us right now.
Yeah.
But I don't I think there's something like an Apollo moon landing, but not 40 or 50 years. Like, I don't know where it takes us or what it does, but it's like, it was very hard to foresee that, like, early 1900s and 1969, you're on the moon makes no sense. But I think AI has something like that in it, which is so completely disruptive. We have no idea what's coming. Do you guys see that, or you think it's a more controllable thing? Like streaming. Like streaming is not that. Streaming is like a normative shift to what we do. AI feels like a break in the entire circuit of how things are.
Huh.
But that's my
100%.
take.
100%.
100%. Okay.
I read way too much, so it's
All right. So we're geeking out right now.
I'm really excited about the future, but also really scared. I don't want robots in the house. I really don't. I don't want AI robots that could beat me up and tie me up or kill me instantly. Even though they clean my home, it still scares me.
Wait, Jason, can I just say something about that? My family has many robots running in the house. A
Yeah.
couple downstairs. There's a robot that cleans the cat, and then it like emails
Yeah.
you. I walk around late at night, and there's like this robot with a red eye looking like Hal, like making its way down the hallway, scaring the crap. So I think they're already there. They're scaring the crap out of
But
us.
are they stronger
they're
than
like
you yet?
insects. Not yet,
When they
not
get
yet.
stronger than you, that's what's scary. But no, I think in terms of it is changing things right now. I think there's we work with a lot of people on the Hollywood end as well, and the whole thing about that your job is going to be replaced or the jobs are being replaced by AI right now, I don't think is true at all. I don't think that's what's happening on the film side. I think Hollywood has made its own mess and they're trying to figure that out. That being said, we have a saying, there's the stuff that we need to shoot and the stuff that we don't, and I think that's what we're going to have. That's what's going to happen very quickly. It's happening already in
Taste.
advertising, like why shoot this when we don't have to? Why do 3 days of a tabletop shoot for a product shot that I could do in AI? And I think that's, and I'd brought that up at the AICP conference in front of a bunch of producers and people that's what they do for a living is go out and shoot things. And, it's one of those uncomfortable things that you just have to acknowledge that it's going to happen. It's happening right now. And the genie's not going to go back in the bottle.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to figure out, how
Where does taste come in? Like, where does your taste, both of you, and not only what should be shot, what even should be made? Like, where does that taste filter come in? Because we're having a Borg-like spread of gray goo of just infinite garbage. And then a couple things that are amazing that no one wants to see the gray goo garbage. That's like trillions of petabytes of crap. How do we stop that?
I don't think that's ever going to stop. I mean, TikTok will show you that, right? So no matter when people have access to something, and it's funny, I did the first US commercial for TikTok years ago. I produced that, and to see what it's turned into now versus what it was originally marketed as is quite interesting. So I think you're always going to have like tons of levels of people. But in movies, there's a ton of B movies and a ton of C rom-coms and whatever. And I think as an audience, you learn to seek out and people will rise to the top of like who you're watching or who you're looking at. But it's, and taste is, I always say taste is relative. There's stuff that people like or that I love that Jason's like, I don't even know how you watch that or vice versa. So I think there's, again, back to the whole idea of like room for everyone. But we say AI will not replace you. Somebody who knows AI will replace you. No different than it was in the early 90s when we all kind of came aboard and, if you knew computers, you got a job. If you knew
Is that a comfy thing we say now to ourselves to get through this earthquake? Are we like, it won't replace us, it's fine? Like, is that, like, do you guys honestly believe that in 10 years that's still true? Now, there may be new people and new roles that are doing something else, but is it just a placator to folks that as people understand AI, it's not coming for you? Because everything I've seen is it's coming for everyone in the way it's currently constructed.
I know I've kind of changed my viewpoint on it. It is coming for you. And I do think that there's a lot of jobs that don't need to be done by humans personally. I think the tedious tasks are going to be offloaded to AI. But there's, when you say taste, I think what's really interesting is I always talk about how taste and gut intuition is the thing that makes us human. And sure, your taste could be different, but there's like a baseline of taste, right? Of what's good and what's bad in terms of just general, like the way our brain perceives things. So I think taste but gut intuition, and that's one of the things like ChatGPT sometimes will convincingly tell you that it's right, and then when you call it out, it's like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I that wasn't right. This is, and you could do that 3 or 4 times and still not get the right answer, and it's just telling you what it wants what it thinks you want to hear. So therefore, like that whole gut like as a human, you're like, I don't know if that's right. That gut intuition is I think what's gonna really be, and I don't know what the right word for is, gut intuition or taste and all those things mixed up. So
I ask you an interesting question. This is super film geeky. But if you go way back to the beginning of cinema, I think there's a path that informs us. Mary Pickford was a subject of horrible directors making crap. And then she like grabbed the camera, kind of wrote the script, directed what was really one of the first great films. And on a pixel level, you can't tell the difference between all the crappy films before and what happened next. I think it was Test of the Storm Country. But somehow she expressed a human capability through the film that moved the entire country. And that was like, I think she created like real acting, real people like were gripped. They were crying in the theater. Where I think that maybe can't be captured. Like it was very interesting to go like all these people just had cameras, were filming just garbage, like a train running or somebody doing something. And then she like figured something out. I wonder if that is a path for humans in all of this mess,
Well, this goes back to something. I'll lead this into your experience on the TED stage, because I want to talk about that before we get back into the sort of the production labor dynamics, which I want to talk about a little bit too. But you mentioned when you were doing your TED talk, which I want to hear about your experience there and how
Yep.
nervous you were doing it, and how fun it was. About obviously the thing that gets stated so many times in so many ways, it feels hyper obvious, but it's that story is everything, right? Is that technology is just a wrapper around the kind of story, the kind of narrative experience we want to deliver to our audience, whatever that audience may be, whether it's an audience of one or a couple hundred in a room, or thousands or millions of people on a technology service, right? And clearly you think about that as a creator and not a technologist, but you have to live on both sides of this equation, right? And
100%.
people make an assumption that you're a technology first company, but I don't think you are. I think your desire is to make interesting stories. And when you did that experiment, asking the audience what they would like to see, and then a few days later, you came out with a really clever and interesting story, right? It's not a clever and interesting technology. I've seen VO do lots of things like that on my LinkedIn feed every day, but you created an interesting narrative. So maybe give us a little insight on your stage experience and why that became more about story than technology.
Sure. Yeah. That was one of the most terrifying things I've ever done. Is, just
I had
the
a
prep
feeling
for it. It's you could put me on stage with no slides and I could talk for an hour about something, but if you give me 5 minutes and I have to stay on script
and stand on a little red carpet, right?
And have to memorize it, it's not my cup of tea. But it was probably one of the greatest experiences of my life. It was so much fun. I think that it's
people
so
were very
well done.
engaged. They were open to your ideas, which you felt in the room, right? And they weren't naysayers. They were trying to learn what you were up to authentically.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things is my background is in interactive storytelling. So I by doing a TED talk that was naturally interactive, that felt kind of on brand. But also the challenge of trying to do. I've never done those 48-hour film festivals or this or that, but I just said, me and a couple people at Secret Level, like, let's stay up all night, a couple nights, and figure out if we could do this. And I'll tell you, the first thing, I'm glad that you said what you said, because the first thing, the thing that took us the longest, to be honest with you, was the story. We really spent the first day of 2.5 days working on story. and really fine tuning that story. Now, we were doing some character explorations and this and that, but it was the story that took the longest because we really wanted to find something that was hopefully going to resonate with the audience, that hopefully took the story beats that they did give us and bring them to life in unexpected ways that were special. So story, to me, always has been everything. I mean, I think that's what's really going to differentiate a lot of what the AI slop is out there in terms of, good storytelling. Like anybody can make something look good now. So that's like the bar is low. So now it becomes story, and and I think story of what types of stories you could tell now, and I never thought in a billion years I'd make a short film about a beaver in an underground city, with a magic sock. But all those things forced it to happen. And with a good story, I feel like, anything's possible.
So for our listeners all around the world, of which are quite a lot, so you're going to get a lot of comments on this when it gets posted and people are listening to it. You can just easily find what Jason is talking about by searching Jason Zada, Zada, TED Talk, and you'll find the link to his actual talk, and then you'll find the link to the little beaver short you made. And my curiosity as I was watching it was it's interesting that you talked about that first day trying to iterate on what this story would be, because when the audience members threw out, like, it's going to have a magic sock or a sock character in it, it could go to some weird, dark places, right?
Oh, it did. It did.
And it did.
It did go
but
to
it's
some.
interesting how you navigated that and still made it like a sort of G-rated or certainly PG-rated kind of thing. But it's like a dirty sort of sock thing with googly eyes. And
the funny thing is, like, to Jason's point of like those 48 hours fest, I think from a producer standpoint, the interesting part to me was that we have 48 hours to create this, and we spent 24 of those just scripting,
right? Just
storying, just figuring out what those points were in all that time. And so when you watch it, comparative to other work, maybe it's not as meaning that we didn't do full cleanup and full this and full that, like we would normally do. But nobody noticed it, and it didn't matter because story is king. And when we showed it to people and people saw it, it blew their mind, and they're like, we can't believe you made that in 48, 50 something hours. But the truth is that of that, half of that time was story. And when you expand that on to like larger projects, you still need that balance of story to actual technology and creation.
Right.
So, we love to take our time with things, but, we always tell people that it's fast. But if we can help in that story, and I think that's what Secret Level's also been really good at, is the people in-house with us, the creative directors we use, Jason, et cetera, are all storytellers. All people who come from storytelling and traditional ways of telling the stories to hit all of those resonating beats with people.
So I just want to call something for the future. 100 years from now, someone listens to this, who the hell knows? But Monica and Jason, I think beaver and a magic sock may be a genre like French New Wave. Like I'm just making the call right now, and there may be like an entire school in Paris dedicated to the autism of like Jason and Monica and the beaver and the magic sock. And there could be like, millions of subgenres, and you get a PhD in it and a fellowship, and there's a literary criticism theory and all that kind of stuff. I'm just calling it right now.
No, I mean,
let's hope the podcast opens up even more of an audience that isn't so focused on AI, right?
It feels very Idiocracy, which it would be on brand as well for the world right now. But no,
I'm all in on the beaver, by the way. Beaver and magic sock, all in on it.
There was an idol of mine, a filmmaker idol of mine, that saw it and called me afterwards and was like, I love the beaver. and he said to me, he said, I think we're all the beaver. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting insight. We're all there pushing the button every day and hoping that everything keeps going until it doesn't. And
there was a little Black Mirror-ish effect to it. And then it kind of it was like between Black Mirror meets Pixar. It's sort of an interesting.
Yeah, it got dark. But, the goal with that was, could we get the audience to feel for this AI character that we created in just a couple days? Can we get some level of emotion out of an audience with AI has always been interesting to me personally. because everybody, I've been, obviously when we put out the Coca-Cola commercial, we got attacked by the entire internet, which was fun. I loved it personally. But this idea that AI is cold, and all these comments that people make about AI, and they say, oh, it's cold, it's soulless, it's this and that. I'm like, well, everybody worked on it, had a soul, and you could say
Those
Pixar.
people are cold.
Yes.
No, like
Well,
it's a reflection of the people using it, right? If you bring warmth and creative direction to it, it will reflect that back.
Yeah.
And I think it's like it's not us. So if you bring soulless, cold thinking, it's reflect that. The scary thing for those people is like they're looking in a mirror, going, "Why am I so cold and soulless?"
Well, and look,
the internet trolls are loud.
to the
By,
point
by
of
the way, for our tech geeks listening, I don't know how many there are. Probably one question they might have, and other folks have evolving new techniques. How did you solve, and if it's a trade secret, it's a trade secret, for character continuity? One of the banes of AI has been the thing just keeps fluctuating, but you guys have been able to be fairly consistent in our said beaver, which is very, very awesome. Opens the door to a lot of stuff. What magic elixir deal with the devil did you do here?
Thank you. I've been lucky to be what's the word, obsessed with really detailed, good prompting. And we had an intern at the time named Fetty, and we worked on the Wu-Tang Clan music video together, and I just kind of kept like, no, we have to do it this way. We really got to the point where it was the fine tuning of a prompt. And I feel like it's, between that and whatever magic Google does behind the scenes, if you could really nail the description, and we do a lot of casting. I know it sounds weird, but we do a lot of casting before we start a project in AI. We'll really explore what our lead characters look like. And we do wardrobe tests. We do the same things that we would do in traditional production, because getting that right, and then having that be this virtual, we call them synthetic, human that you're bringing to life, or synthetic character. It's just super detailed prompting, and not JSON prompting. Just so
and the tools themselves, in a fairly quick evolution, just a year,
Yeah, and
have
learning
gotten
how to.
remarkably better at this. Like clearly the desire for creators like you and the millions of others around the world was, this is all great, except it's really struggling to do this. So I think the tech companies put resources learning into, okay, we need this consistent, if you ask it to do something and then are planning to do something that has multiple shots and multiple deliverables across a period of time, then those characters need to look the same. And you can prompt it all you want, but if the tools don't allow you to do it, it's not going to do it, right? So, and there's probably 15 or 20 tools that have focused on continuity and consistency of character now. So you're getting the benefit of those tech dollars being spent, right?
It's also the language. I think, each tool kind of it's all based on the same thing, but it also has a different level of language. The way we prompt in VO is different than the way you prompt in Kling, is different than the way you prompt in Runway.
Right.
In having that understanding of all that, I think, I joke all the time that Jason's like the king of consistency, especially within VO. People are like, how did you? And I'm just like, his prompts are this long for characters. Like, there's so much descriptive detail. And I think that sometimes prompters think they can just go, guy 55, like, if I describe that, you're not going to get it.
Midjourney made everybody lazy. You could literally type 4 words in and get a great picture out. So it made people lazy. They were like, oh, this is easy.
So Jason gives descriptions, like if somebody mugged you and you had to give a description of who mugged you. That's how Jason gives a description down to like the T. And I think it's just not being lazy with the prompting, and really taking your time to cultivate what those scenes are really makes a difference overall.
So essentially, the more you put into it, the more you get out of it, right? And if you're lazy, you're going to get a lazy product. And if you're detailed, you'll get a detailed product, right?
Yeah.
I think it's all about the level of commitment, to be honest with you. And that's why, I sit in a pretty weird and interesting place where, we have about 13 or 14 projects going on right now at Secret Level, big projects. And I'm in all of our Slacks, and I'm just watching all of this work being done. and in real time. And it's just such an incredible place to see. And then I'll look at these cuts and I'll sit with the team and I'll go, this looks too much like AI. This isn't, the motion of this isn't right, this and that. I think that our brains, I think a lot of the people that first moved into AI because it wasn't quite there yet, we've trained our brains to go, well, it looks good enough. And I think what we're after, at least as a company, at least what I'm always after with character consistency, with anything, is just like it needs to be at a quality bar that I don't think a lot of people in the industry are really interested in right now. And I think that that's what hopefully has set us apart from a lot of our peers in terms of, being able to push it as far as we humanly can, that and get the results that we get out of AI.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so we have a sort of a few minutes left, so I want to unpack the beginnings of what you're talking about and expand on it a little bit, kind of for our last topic of discussion, because it's interesting because of the sort of, let's call it, labor concerns and controversies around this, and I want to get your take on it. Probably, certainly from both years, but more from Monica as a producer and thinking about the labor dynamics that you use to create these things. So I'm going to touch on a couple of things that I want you to comment on and give us your insights on. So the first thing is, you mentioned the Coca-Cola ad, right? And I think there was a good amount of healthy critique around that ad. Certainly the trolling and stuff, let's leave that to the side because that's not what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is there was a certain look that kind of an early AI deliverable had, which I refer to as kind of the cellophane wrapper look. Like everything looked like it was sort of dipped in oil. And it's kind of got this plasticky kind of effect or this is kind of what early AI visuals did before there was that refinement to make things look more organic. And now I think we're at a point where things can look truly organic. Like it's remarkable how quickly it changed. But you put yourself out there, tip of the spear, with a giant, multi-tiered corporation, and they're trying a risk and you're trying a risk. And I think creatively it was interesting, but visually, at least for me and a lot of people, it felt like that's clearly AI. Like it just looks like AI. So did you have any personal feelings through the process of that and the deliverable of that? And then, like, if Coca-Cola came back and called you today and said, we want to do it again, I would imagine it would look massively different than it looks like now. So let's start with that. And then I've got one more sort of area to touch on.
Yeah, I think,
Go
I was going to say, what I love about that project is that when we were going through the ideation phase with Coca-Cola directly, a lot of the conversation was about that. So we're very aware of like where the technology was at that time. And we have that conversation with all our projects of where we can go, where we can push it. So we designed as a collective a piece that could go out where we know what the look is going to be. And so we leaned heavier into what that kind of, dreamy like feel was. We didn't try to go like super realistic, hyper realistic, all of those things. And definitely, I think, yes, it had that AI feel, but we weren't trying to trick anybody either. And that was kind of the idea behind everything of like, let's put out a good ad. We're not trying to make people believe that it's real. We know people are no different than animation. I'm not trying to put animation out for people to think it's real, but let's lean into what animation does well. Let's lean into what AI does well. And so, when I did read like the blowback on all of that, like Jason said, I was thrilled in that 95% was the wheels and it looks like AI in Uncanny Valley. There was no comments about the story sucked, the people suck, I didn't like this was horrible. It was all so incredibly nitpicky on things. It showed that what we do as creators is the most important thing, and that's story. If I look back at other films that like, I look back, I'm like, that film looks ridiculous now that the technology's advanced, but I love that film and I would never change it. Right. And so that's kind of what we were edging towards.
Yeah, that's your essence, right? Is that. So that's really
but at the same time, I mean, I just want to point out that Coca-Cola tested that ad and it tested through the roof with people prior to it going out. But they didn't tell people that it was AI. And I think the average person didn't really care
Error or
didn't
no.
It was the
notice.
highest rated
They just thought it was
commercial.
stylistically, like it just looked like a different style than something they'd seen
Yeah,
before.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that's what's really interesting is like all of us that are in the business, we have that hypercritical eye. We could see it, but I remember my mom is like my litmus test for that. So I sent it to my mom, and she's like, "Why is everybody mad?" She's like, "It looks fine." But yeah, I
We
mean, you're
often
absolutely
forget
right.
what an
The look of
isolated little bubble we live in, right?
Yeah.
we live in a bubble. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
100%, and the average person doesn't really care.
So, free to talk about anything else you want. Rony might have to hop off in a minute for a meeting, but we'll just wrap things up. The one area I do want to touch on, because we've touched around it a little bit, but we didn't really dive into it. But you started to talk on it a little bit. Rony's going to say goodbye. Is the the production dynamics, like you mentioned, the art and activity of going out and shooting things. It's a collaborative process. It's creative. It's like summer camp. It's fun and challenging in all kinds of different ways to put a group of people together in the same physical space and do something, right? Um, do you have thoughts around how dramatic this change will be? And I think there's a valid answer to say, well, things evolve and new industries pop up and new labor forces pop up. But for me, looking at the producer side and feeling quite fortunate that I'm not in the first act or second act of my career, I'm in sort of the third and fourth act of my career now,
Yeah,
and sort of living through that in a nice way to kind of have my arc. I look at things that require a sort of messy labor dynamic, right? Going out and shooting big crowd scenes, shooting
hmm
big stunt sequences, shooting things that clearly producers are looking at and going, why would I ever need to hire 5,000 extras, put them in a football stadium when I can do this? And there have been precursors to this in the VFX world, right? There are tools
yeah,
like Massive where people have figured this out, but now it's becoming so prevalent. And the reason I
yeah,
ask is because of the changes in the economic dynamics of your commercial clients. Are they expecting that it used to cost them $1 million, $2 million to make this commercial, and now they're going to come to you and say, we have $25,000 and we expect you to deliver the same thing we delivered 10 years ago for $1 million? Are you starting to feel that? Because I know on the producing side and the stress point of people trying to make more deliverables, that's a real thing, right? And they're sort of cleaning house on all of those extra expenses that used to be real, that the only way you could do it was this. And now they have a different way that can lower their costs, which effectively lowers everybody's ability to have jobs, make work, and make profit. So I think that's an
yeah.
interesting place to discuss a little bit before we wrap up.
Well, no, Monica definitely has a point of view on that.
uh, so yeah, for me, we try to stay away from the like it's cheaper. How much less money do you have? We really kind of say like we can make that money go farther now. We can do more then. So maybe you have $200,000, $300,000, but you also need these deliverables, and then you also need social pieces, and you also need all of these other things that we can try to parlay into that same amount of money. So we still want you, and we still encourage, and we still get people and brands to use that money and pay that money to employ more people. But ultimately, what we want to tell them is that you get more for what it is. The amortization of those costs with us doing it in-house is a huge savings in and of itself. And the thread of being able to have a project go from top to bottom, you can do a 30 with us, you can get your socials done, you can do microsite, you can do a live action pop-up, all under the same umbrella, ultimately saves you the money, but we still want you to spend money. We still want people to employ people.
So the strategy is more of a bang for the buck strategy.
Yeah,
Get
it's
more output.
definitely trying to shift that mentality of let's not talk about cheaper. Let's talk about how do we now turn that into something that's going to be beneficial to you.
It's more efficient, really, is what we always tell our clients. Is just the efficiency is we have a saying that we're now able to move at the speed of culture, and I think advertising is really, I think ever since the internet came, advertising has been chasing culture, and never been able to keep up, really. And you have these like little moments like on the Super Bowl where, a brand tweeted something out that went viral because it was reacting in real time to culture. We can now do that with AI. And I think that's what's really interesting is the speed. And I think anybody who's doing ads commercials for $25,000, it's a race to the bottom. I try to tell everyone that that's not the future. Please don't do that, because it really is craft at the end of the day. And whether that craft is done on set or whether that craft is done on a bunch of computers, it still is craft. And I think we just try to avoid the race to the bottom at all costs.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective. Great. Well, unless you guys have anything else that you want to cover that I didn't cover that you think is salient and important right now in this age of the fall of 2025, we can call that a wrap for today. It's a really interesting hour, a really interesting discussion. Lots of topics that we could drill into. We should have you back again. Maybe when you deliver your next big project, you should send us a ping and say, hey, we just did this and we'd love to talk like in depth about one project. I think that would be a really interesting discussion.
Yeah.
And it's exciting to see your success, and it's exciting to see how many people are paying attention and how you're using social platforms and media itself to build a new business arc, which
really
I think is
appreciate
something that successful people have always done, right? Find a new way to make new business arcs. So I appreciate your time and the fact that you were able to sit with us. I know you're very busy. And that is our show for today. And we'll see you all next week. Charlie will be back next week off a plane, hopefully. And thanks for joining us. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.